Hey everybody. So today I want to look at your final project proposals. This is a really big deal because this sort of sets the stage for what you're going to do in your final project. And honestly, in this class, I really look at all of your previous assignments as opportunities for you guys to really take some chances, experiment, recognizing that you're learning some new techniques here. So all of those things I will tend to grade you in a way that's pretty forgiving. However, as we get to the final project here, I really want to see that you understand what the keys are to a successful photograph. So I obviously am looking for technical precision here. I don't want to see images that are out of focus unless there's some intentional out of focus. So if you're doing, a motion blur or something abstract where blurring is in there, then it would be okay. And in that instance, I probably would see that, but it might be a good idea maybe just to mention that in your artist statement. But otherwise, we're looking for images that are sharply focused, that are exposed correctly. Again, exposure can be sort of a subjective thing. Sometimes you might be looking for a little bit darker, moodier shot. So, you know, we're looking for what we'll call appropriate exposure, maybe not correct exposure, appropriate exposure. And then I want to see that, you understand light, you're photographing things in the best light that is possible. I want to see that you have some sort of idea or concept of what you're doing here. I just don't want you randomly going out and shooting beautiful things. And then lastly, I want to see you doing this in a way that is sort of new and creative. So you're trying to break cliche in these photographs here. So with that being said, let's start taking a look at all of your project proposals here, and I'll give you some feedback. So first and foremost, we have Savannah's work, and I'm actually going to pull over her proposal just a second, and if you guys want to look at it and read that on your own, you can pause the video at this point and just stop and read it, but just so we have that out there. So Savannah, you're kind of proposing almost two different projects here, it sounds like. One of them, you talk about growing up in Buffalo and being attracted to the Bills and the Sabres and sort of all the things in Buffalo that are unique and special. And then you talk about your experience in college with soccer and your teammates and how that relates to playing in Buffalo. And I don't think that you should be quite that broad. I almost wonder if you just focus in on your teammates and soccer and what soccer means to it, and maybe forget about the Buffalo end of it. I think, again, in this type of project, you really want it to be very close and personal and intimate in a visual sense. And I think really, you spend a great portion of your time playing soccer, being around soccer teammates, and all of that. So I just wonder if going that direction is going to serve you a lot better than sort of incorporating the idea of Buffalo in there. Because I really think that's going to confuse and muddle matters a lot there. So go that direction, and certainly, these two jerseys are a good reflection of that direction you can go in. These very much speak to me about your specific experience playing soccer at Canisius. These images don't feel at all to me like they really have honestly anything to do with Buffalo other than the fact that Canisius is in Buffalo. Yet when we look at it in sort of a different way and looking at it as a more specific project related to soccer, I think these are perfectly reasonable, very logical, and they work for me. I love the fact that we sort of got this great backlighting going on here. I think maybe the exposure in this jersey could be fixed a little bit. We can just jump in and create a new adjustment layer here change the blending mode to screen, and then I'm going to invert this mode. So, I'm sorry, image adjustments, invert, and then you can see here our mask, our layer mask there is now black. So if we go over and change our color, foreground color to white, and select paintbrush, now we can paint that mask just onto this area of the photograph there. And now you can see how we see a little bit more of the details in your image there. And we can see some of the mesh in the jersey, and I think it just has a little bit more pop. So anyhow, I think this is the way to go. Take a really intimate look at soccer. Show the viewer something that they wouldn't see. So, don't take pictures of, wide shots of the soccer game from the stands, or, something that the ordinary spectator would see. Show us soccer from your point of view, from your perspective as a player. Look for some of the intimate details, close-up shots of the field or the jerseys, or the soccer balls, or even if you can take your camera into maybe some of your meetings, or even some of the off the field things that you share with your classmates, like the times that you're in meals or meetings or something like that. And it might take a little bit where you got to say to your coach, hey, I'm working on a final project here, and this is a really important final project, and if I do good in this, I'm going to get a great grade in the class, which is going to improve the average GPAs for the whole team. So it's something that is not only personal for you, but when we look at GPAs of the different programs, whether it's soccer or basketball or hockey, the better you do, the better the team does in that overall perspective. So maybe you can talk to the coach. Maybe he'll let you bring the camera onto the field or into the meetings or whatever, and hopefully you'll come up with some stuff that is going to be a little different than what we would just see if we were to casually observe the game. So I think you're in a really good position to do that, and sometimes it's these obvious things that are right next to us that we overlook that really can turn out to be really good. So I think that's the direction you need to go in. Forget about the Buffalo thing. Just concentrate on soccer and how that is really important in your life, and all the little things that you see that the average viewer wouldn't see. And I think you'll really hit it out of the ballpark with that. So hopefully that helps you going forward, and hopefully you can pull it all together by the end of the week here. So next up we have Greg's work, and I'm just going to leave his proposal up here for a second or two so everyone can take a look at it. And let me scroll down here to the bottom page. And again, you can freeze or stop this, pause this in YouTube, and just take a look at the individual things here. So as you can see by his proposal, Greg's doing a project on addiction here, and I really love the direction you're going in all of this. I think you're putting it all together in terms of composition, lighting, and even technical precision. I love this image in that, when I talk about getting correct exposure, well, this probably isn't correct exposure, and in fact, if we looked at our histogram of this, we can see it's really in the dark end of the scale here. But the thing is that it works for this because the whole concept of addiction is a very dark one, and you're creating a mood and a feeling with these images that is kind of dark. So your aesthetic decisions, your exposure decisions really support the concept that you're doing here. And that's what I'm looking for from everyone in the class. So really great job with this. The one thing I would say here, this image maybe looks like it's just maybe a teeny bit out of focus. Maybe I'm wrong. No, I guess as we zoom in here, I think it's just a little bit grainy there. So Again, and even the graininess or the noisiness of it, I think works really well. Second shot here, again, the like really dark little pockets of lighting in there. I think really, again, emphasize sort of the darkness of addiction and the whole theme that or subject matter that you are trying to address here works really well. So again, another awesome shot. I think that's perfect, and even sort of a self-portrait here. One of the things that I love is that in going in here, we see the reflection in your glasses, and you can see what the thing is that you're looking at on the computer, and again how it relates to that overall idea of addiction. So fantastic job. I guess maybe the one question we have here is sequencing. Which image do we put at the beginning of the project and which one at the end of it? I might opt for maybe an image like this being at the beginning of it, because we so obviously associate cigarettes with addiction. The one thing I look at this image, and as I'm brainstorming here, maybe having the cigarette lit and having a little bit of smoke coming off there might even help this image just a little bit. So, again, some ideas thrown out at you. But again, super awesome job here. I love the direction you're going. I love your choices. So you're in good shape. Just come up with another, 7 images that support this idea. Try to have them all, looking the same way in this sort of moody, dark pockets of light style. And I think you're going to hit it all out of the ballpark here. So great job with this. And I really like where you're going. So next up we have McKenna's images, and so you can see the subject matter that she is addressing here is one of how women are sort of challenged to dress a certain way and live up to certain expectations in society. And she's doing that in looking really at specific details uh, of that process. So again, here's her project proposal, and I'll let you guys give it a read. And again, you can pause that and look at it a little bit more. And then going into her images. So McKenna, I absolutely love this image for a lot of reasons. First of all, I really like the fact that you've chosen to do it in black and white. So black and white almost gives a feeling of timelessness, and I think this relates very specifically to your project at large. Is that sort of women have always had this expectation of behavior and dress and looks, and always in a way sort of being judged by those things. So I love the fact that the black and white adds sort of that timeless feel to it. I also like the fact that if you look at magazines, and especially high fashion magazines, sort of black and white always has like this look of crisp beauty. And if even if you look at photographers that have been seen as like very iconic in the industry, they've always use black and white images. So, you go to like Richard Avedon, his work has always been done in, or Irving Penn, always done in black and white. So black and white is, I think, very much part of the culture of beauty. So, that being said, I want you to do your whole project in black and white. When we look at this, honestly, McKenna, this kind of looks to me like it just, was shot, could have been shot on an iPhone. There's nothing really special about it or different about it. Going back to this image, also, look at these beautiful long shadows here that also end up, sort of looking very dramatic and, really bring emphasis to the shape and the pattern and the design of this. Whereas this image here, the shadows aren't quite as long. You probably have to bring your light down a little bit. Play if you're using um, a lamp light or a floodlight or something like that. Play around with the position of it, and I think you're going to find you'll be able to get those shadows really interesting. And again, let's change this to black and white here, and let's play around with our levels a little bit. Something like this and like this. Again, now you can start to get sort of that dramatic look. Although honestly, I love the other image. I think the other image is just really beautiful. This one doesn't have sort of that geometric pattern and shape to it. And again, I like the fact that like there's a rigid expectation of the way women should look. And I think this again, sort of how everything's uniformly set up, I think that really speaks to that. Whereas this image sort of feels a little bit random, a little less set up and staged, which I think is what you want in this instance, because almost the expectation of beauty is something that is staged. So maybe head in that direction. And then this image again, maybe this shot is something that you use at the beginning of your project, and again, maybe going into black and white here. And I almost wonder, if we zoom in a little bit, I sort of like stuff like this, a little bit tighter type of shots. That again, notice how like now you've got some geometric patterns going on that again are very symmetrical and very rigid, and I think that again supports that notion of rigidness and expectations of beauty here. So notice when we're zoomed out like this, I mean there's a lot to look at here. There's a screen, there's a phone, there's your hand, and quite honestly, I'm almost more attracted to the way the light is falling on the keys of the computer here as opposed to the actual photographs themselves. Whereas, once we zoom in something like this, now we begin to see sort of, again, that expectation of beauty. And I start to see here now, especially this image I'm really attracted to. And even, this one here also. So I think black and white is the way to go. I think look for those strong patterns going on in things, and I think that that is going to serve you a lot better than sort of mixing in black and white and color here. Because honestly, more often than not, mixing black and white and color kind of isn't very cohesive. Whereas if you have all of these images in black and white, like I showed you, notice then how it sort of creates a very cohesive style that very much says, hey, this is the way McKenna sees things. So hopefully you'll take my advice here and do a good job, and we'll look forward to seeing what you have. And of course, if you do have questions on this, give me a buzz or shoot me an email, and we can talk about this a little bit more. Okay, next up we have Natasha's work. And Natasha's going to do a project that speaks to the issue of the use of pesticides and bugs and how it affects, the overall health of our environment. One of the things that you're going to notice here is all of a sudden at the end here, Natasha, you kind of throw in this other thing. I want to take pictures of, water and refuse and focus on roadkill and other stuff. I think you're trying to do too much there. I think if you really just stick to bugs and pesticides, keep it a very tight, compact, very to the point issue, I think that's going to have much more of an impact than trying to do, all kinds of pollution and all these different things as a very, very broad and wide open project. Again, I think you guys want to be very tight and cohesive in what you do here. So, we go in and look at your images. I mean, holy cow, your bug images are just stunning and beautiful. So why not stick to that? And you've got your first image here with the pesticide sign. I think it's perfect. Here is your opening title shot. Of course, the one thing I would say here is maybe I want the sign to be in focus, not the flower. Because the real issue here is pesticides. So in the first shot, we get the sign in issue, and um, that was going to draw our attention specifically and very concisely to what the topic of this subject matter is. So you start with that, you have the sign in focus, and then you go to the bug photographs, and these bug photographs then they kind of show the beauty of bugs. And I don't look at this image and say, ew, there's a horrible bug. I see, wow, what a beautiful sort of almost overlooked part of our society is there. And do we really want to kill these things? And same way with this image. Again, very beautiful shot. Especially with all this green in there, I think it's fantastic. Maybe show a few more beautiful bug shots like this, and then perhaps show an image or two of a bug that's been harmed, a dead bug or something that, has been clearly affected by these pesticides, or even, more shots of pesticides, whether it's someone applying pesticides, that might be kind of a stretch to find that. But again, just trying to find stuff that just specifically relates to this theme. And then, and then again, maybe have, sort of a great closer photograph like, some fruit or something that has been, or, a flower from, a tomato plant or a zucchini plant or something like that, that is being, fertilized by or pollinated by these bugs to show how the impact of having these bugs is important to our society. So that's the direction I would go. I would maybe stay away from doing, all that other stuff that you threw in at the end here. You've got enough to do with just bugs alone. And really, your bug shots are super beautiful, super compelling, and that's going to work really well for the project. So go in that direction, and I think you're going to be in good shape. Okay. Okay, next up we have Allison's work. And again, I'll just let you take a look at her proposal. And let's scroll it up a little bit. Sorry, let me just do this. Ellison, just you didn't give me your images separately, so I've got to look at them actually in um, the Word document here rather than separately. Whoops. So anyhow, two things that you talk about here that I find to be very compelling. So first of all, you talk about how, your parents have always been very open with you about the human body. Your dad's a physician. Um, so the human shape, the human form, all of that is very relevant for you and something that interests you, and you have a fascination with. So great start on that point. And then the second thing you talk about, sort of seeing this movie when you were young and sort of getting creeped out by it, and just sort of having dark thoughts, I guess, for lack of other way to I'm sorry, you put it better here. Overactive imagination. So you're kind of combining those two things, and I think, wow, that's just a really, really fascinating approach, and one that I think works really well here for this project. So, the one thing in reading your proposal, wow, beautifully written, And I almost feel like this proposal could be an artist statement in and of itself. So, maybe just kind of chop this down. We probably only want an artist statement to be maybe 1 page. So if you tighten this up a little bit, I think you've got a perfect artist statement there. So great job on that, and great job on the written part. Let's look at these pictures. I'm actually going to grab these pictures, do screen grabs, and put them into Photoshop. Okay, okay, so we've got these images in Photoshop here. It's interesting. You said to me in your reflections there, or your proposal, that you weren't super happy with the weather and you didn't like it. But honestly, given everything that you talk about in that proposal, I think, the lighting in here is really beautiful. I like the fact that it's kind of overcast and cloudy, and it looks like you've darkened up the exterior of it here. So I think again that sort of reflects the idea of that overactive imagination, that, you know, it's not this, happy, sunny, beautiful. And in fact, I think if you, had images that were shot in like beautiful sunlight with a ton of saturation in them, I think that it would almost look kind of like cartoony. So, I don't know about you, but I really feel like your lighting is actually really great here. The other thing that these images sort of reminded me of was a photographer named Francesca Woodman. I'm going to call her up here so you can see the name if you want to go in and do a little bit of research on there. Um, but a lot of she did a lot of these self portraits um, that were very creative, unique. Sort of had sort of a dark, ethereal mystery to them. Um, you know, I'm not saying to do exactly what she's doing here, but as sort of like an inspiration, I think very much, what she's doing is kind of interesting and kind of relevant. And even looking at some of the images you submitted for the last assignment, I almost feel like, again, there's stuff here that you could at least use, if nothing else, for sort of kind of inspiration moving forward. And then that brings us up to the subject. You talk a little bit about sort of the overactive imagination. And again, people always ask me, like, where's the appropriate place to use black and white? Where is it not? I think, again, sort of the idea of that, not quite real, sort of imagined, ethereal idea is very much something that we associate with black and white imagery here. So, maybe something like that might be a direction to go. I'm not saying you have to do that. And, honestly, your color image like this, it works for me. It definitely works for me. But you may want to just play around with black and white a little bit and see if that helps to reinforce your concept there a little bit stronger. Again, like the shot, I like the diagonals in here. The diagonals sort of give us a lot of tension, a lot of anxiety, which again, to me kind of speaks to that whole notion of having that overactive imagination. And I also really like the form, the shape that she's in, and even going back to the previous image here, again we sort of see the human body front and center in this image. I especially love how we've got sort of, we can almost see the musculature or the muscularity of her stomach there. And her shape is very clear and distinct. You've got her arms out away from her body, which again, one of the mistakes that people do when we're doing pictures of the human form is they kind of bring the arms in close to the form, and it disrupts sort of the whole shape of the body here. So I think you've done a really neat job on that with both of these images here. Your last image is almost kind of an abstract image, but again, looking at Francesca Woodman's shots, there is a certain amount of abstraction and blur and mystery that's going on with them. So from that perspective, I think it works really well. You're totally going in the right direction here. I love what you're doing. Your images are very, very conceptually rooted, which is one of the most important things about this class. You guys probably have gotten the message at this point that, I want you to be technically strong. I want you to understand how to use a camera. But even more importantly, I want you to be conceptually rooted, not just like you're pointing cameras at anything that's beautiful and pushing the button. I really want you to think about your images and come up with something that's very personal and very interesting. And I think you've done it here. You know, push yourself to be even more creative, push yourself to go even farther with the human form. I mean, really put that human form at front and center, and don't be afraid to show the body in a way that demonstrates your comfort level with it. And especially like this first image here again, how you're showing the human shape and the human form here in a way that almost demonstrates your knowledge of the body and the different parts of it here. So I think you're doing a really great job. I love where you're going here. Um, just again, encourage you to continue along this direction and research Francesca Woodman a little bit. You know, her concept certainly is a little bit different, and certainly there were some other issues in her life that get expressed in her work. So I'm not saying at all copy what she's doing, but always like to use other photographers as inspiration or getting ideas or helping us to even push our work one step further. So take a look at some of that stuff, do a little bit more research, and I think again, you're well on your way to putting together a really outstanding final project here. So keep up the good work, and again, if you have any questions, get in touch with me. So next up we have Sarah's work, and as you can see by her project proposal, her sister is visiting and she wants to do a project that basically speaks to her sister and kind of captures her personality and her experience here. So let us take a look at some of your images. So I really love the fact that you've got sharp focus on her and we've got our background out of focus. Yet I still feel like your background's kind of a little bit busy in this shot, and the whole shot itself is a little bit busy. What almost fascinates me is this cool reflection that's going on in the window here. And I almost wonder if you moved your camera position over here a little bit, that you could juxtapose her against this reflection and perhaps sort of a creative way of approaching this image. Because it does kind of feel like to me like, you could have just sat down and shot a thoughtless image of her sitting in a restaurant eating. So maybe just taking a little bit different approach on this, a little bit of different position might help it a little bit. Next shot here. I think there's a great detail shot. Maybe lighten it up just a little bit. I think it's a little bit on the dark side. When we go a little bit lighter here, I think it really works. This image works really well when we're doing something like this, when we're doing a series of images and you've got a lot of shots. So this can kind of work as the detail shot. In traditional documentary photography, we always say that you want a long shot or sort of a wide shot, and then a medium shot, and then a close-up shot. So this would be sort of your close-up shot, and probably this image would be either your long or your medium shot. So I think this is a great shot, works really well, and technically executed really well with the small depth of field on there. And then the shot in the locker room, holy cow. This is a really fantastic shot. I think this is the kind of shot that, again, the average viewer's probably not going to see. Again, I think you were a little bit dark there, so I just lightened that up a little bit for you. Maybe even change this, something like that there. But again, I think this is an awesome shot. And you took it from a vantage point that's really low, which is not a vantage point that the average viewer would see this in. So it's not a common shot or a cliche shot. And, it doesn't look really posed. It looks like, honestly, you sort of captured her at a very intimate moment, a quiet moment. There's stuff going on around her. So it's not like, you may have set her up here, but it doesn't seem like you really set her up here. And this to me is also, I think, just a great intro shot, maybe the beginning of your project. And I love this in comparison to this shot because this shot it feels kind of posed, whereas this shot feels really natural and really authentic and really kind of captures like her intense involvement with basketball here. So love this shot a lot. I think, you can go in this direction a lot more. And I think if you can do that, it's really going to be a strong project. So, this shot and this shot, I think, are two really, really good shots. This shot, again, just feels a little too posed for me. Certainly having her out in a restaurant, you can use that, and I think it's a great idea. It's part of her experience here in Buffalo, but I think you want to get a little bit more creative with it, a little bit different vantage point or different angle or different approach to it. So keep working it, and I'm super glad that you're doing, again, a concept. You use the word theme here. Maybe we use the word concept rather than theme. I think that just feels a little bit more academic here. So that's the way to go, and keep doing shots like this. I think you'll end up with a project that's really strong. So again, any questions or concerns, give me a shout. But other than that, I think you are well on your way to putting something together that is going to look really good. So that is that for your stuff. So next up we have Kaz's photos. He is working in the woods around his house up in Lewiston. So I'll leave this up here a second. You guys can take a quick read of that. And then let's take a look at his images in Photoshop. So I just want to start out with this image and this image. If you look at these two images, the color is somewhat muted in it. They're somewhat monochromatic in that, it's primarily dominated by a lot of greens in there. You had mentioned that, your lens was fogging up on you also. And I'm not necessarily sure that that is ultimately a problem because we don't have to have perfectly sharp stuff. In fact, some of the softness of that can contribute to the overall mood and feel of it. So then we throw in this third image. The third image sort of feels very different than those first two images. We've got a lot of warm color in here. It's more of a silhouetted type of image rather than, a straight-on soft light kind of image. It is, monochromatic in the sense that, it's primarily in the warmer oranges colors. But when we look at it against these again, it feels a little bit different. So I got to say, I love both of these, and I love this shot. So I just wonder if you maybe pick a direction to go, either go like, really lots of greens, lots of muted colors, or go with, stuff that shot late in the day that has a lot of warm tones in it and doing a lot of silhouetted stuff like this. Honestly, the more I look at it, I think probably for me, this is the more interesting shot, the more compelling shot. It feels like it has a very unique, interesting mood. It feels, again, very different than what somebody would do if they, just went out in the woods and started snapping shots with their iPhone. Again, probably that this shot might be an example of that. where this image really seems to be unique, different, and have a feel, a mood, a character to it. And I love the silhouetted backlit stuff. Maybe find a lot of different objects in the wood that, again, you can kind of silhouette up against that. And then their shape and their outline becomes very interesting and very different. So that's probably the direction I would take on this. In either instance, I think you can be successful with either one of these ways, but I'm not sure I would want to mix the two. Want to be cohesive here, so I think pick one of the two ways of approaching it and run with that. So again, stuff looks good. Just some aesthetic decisions here, and kind of figuring out what direction ultimately you want to go to keep the whole project cohesive. So think about that, and if you have any questions, let me know. So next up, we have Christina's images, and Christina is working with life underwater. She's said that she's always had a particular fascination for aquariums and the life forms that live underwater here. So she is going to take that on in her project. The one thing I'm going to say here, Christina, is that, and you kind of recognize it here, you are taking on a project that's going to have a little bit higher degree of difficulty than some of the other stuff that people have taken. The simple reason for that is there's not a lot of light underwater. As you probably know, when light starts coming through water, it gets filtered out. So you're going to end up getting a lot of blue tones and not a lot of other tones in the water. So, you just have to be very aware of that and try to do your best to compensate for those things when you're working in the Photoshop Camera Raw panel. So let's take a look at some of your images. So your first image, I think right away points out some of the problems that you're going to get into. It looks like this is a sea lion here swimming, and the sea lion's not very well focused. And because the sea lion sort of like its excuse me, its fins are very close to its body, it kind of obstructs its shape. And to the average viewer looking at this, and especially without the title and the extra information, boy, I'd have a tough time even figuring out that this is a sea lion. So, two things that are going to be important here. First of all, trying to capture the shape of the creature that you're shooting in a way that the average viewer is going to understand what it is. And then the second problem is obviously the darkness here. You're really going to have to start lightening up things. Here I've lightened up the image a little bit, although we still really can't see the details of the sea lion here. So, that's really just going to be a challenge for you, and you're going to have to probably spend a little bit more time and a little bit effort working on that. Now, here we see the sharks. You did a better job of capturing the shark's form. We can see sort of the outline of the sharks, and we all, recognize very, very immediately those back tail fins that are very emblematic of sharks. But again, you're almost like you've got two sharks together here, so it's blending together their body shapes. So, I would love this shot, but I would love it just with one shark rather than two sharks, so we can really see the outline of the sharks and their shapes. I'm going to go back to this image again, and I want to look at your file info. Here's the other problem. You're working at 1/40th of a second. It's not going to capture things sharp at 1/40th of a second. I have been beating the drum on this all semester long, and you got to get that shutter exposure setting higher than this. For these animals moving underwater, I probably want to be at 1/250th of a second. So that's going to be at least 2 stops of light. So we know we have to multiply this twice or double this twice. So ISO of 800, then an ISO of 1600. You should be working with ISOs of either 1600 here or 3200. And that's going to give you the shutter setting that is going to be fast enough to capture these creatures frozen up. So I really like the idea of these two shots, but the technical execution of them is really not ideal. So I definitely would go back and try and reshoot these things and get them in a way that is going to capture them a little bit stronger. Again, this image really dark. I'm kind of fascinated with what's going on underneath this rock here, but I can't really see it too well. So we got an exposure issue going on, and we also have a focus issue, which the sharp focus is right up here rather than right in here. So really, it's something you're going to have to work out. You know, as you mentioned, the interesting thing here is the fish swimming here. But I don't get fish at all out of this because the fish is out of focus. So it's going to take some practice, it's going to take some time, and you really have to think very concisely about what it is that you want us to see. Do you want us to see, you know, a bunch of coral or rocks here, or do you want us to see fish swimming? You know, your intention is important here, and in your proposal you said that the fish swimming is the most important thing here, and I'm not getting that. So again, practice, 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 and be very aware of what you want the viewer to see. You know, out of all the shots, I think this is probably the most interesting here. We've got sort of these patterns of the arms from, I don't know, are they sea urchins or anemones, whatever the case is. I think it's very interesting. Again, I wonder if, you know, just maybe zooming in a little bit could make this image even more powerful. And, you know, I know it's again might be a little bit tough, but if you get a Finding Nemo sitting in here, I think that sort of breaks the pattern of these sort of finger-like arms of the anemone and could be an interesting addition to it. So just to summarize here, Christina, you know, I like the idea. I like what you're working with. It's interesting. It's fascinating, and certainly it's very personal. The problem is again, it's really hard to do. So you're going to have to spend some extra time. You're going to have to take a lot of shots. Pay particular attention to that shutter setting. You're probably going to have to raise your ISOs very high here, in which case you're probably going to get a lot of noise, which is kind of the sacrifice that you're going to have to make to get your images sharp and in focus. And if you do all those things, you know, I have no doubt this project will be really wonderful. But you got a little bit of work ahead of you here, and it's going to take some time and a lot of clicks to get the kind of images we need here. So get out there, keep shooting, and if you have any questions, get in touch with me and we'll help you work through them. So next up we have Shira's work, and here is her proposal. I'll let that sit up there a second or two. You guys can take a look at that and pause it if you need to. And just catch that last part of her proposal here. So as you can see, Shira is working with Army vets and dogs, and I just really, really love the whole concept of this. I think it again is a very personal concept, so anytime we have something that is very personal, very emotional, I think it is going to be very compelling. The other part of it is I think it's, you know, a unique idea that isn't very cliche. So with that being said, I think you know, have an opportunity to show the average viewer who might not necessarily know about these things something interesting, something wonderful, something powerful about this experience. So let me just grab your images and throw them in Photoshop here a second. So let's take a look at these images now. So first shot, I think this is probably your least successful image of the group. While, you know, I think the idea here is really good, there's a couple things that I think maybe you could change up that would help this image. First of all, you're kind of cutting the dog off here a little bit at the middle of his legs, his or her legs, I'm sorry. If you just took a camera angle that was a little bit lower, and this might mean that you've got to get way down on the ground, then I think that you would be able to capture the whole body of the dog in a way that isn't kind of awkwardly cut off here at the bottom of the frame. I do also think like your image is just a teeny bit on the dark side, so we could kind of brighten that image up a little bit. And then we do have some busyness in the background here, which in one way I'm a little bit comfortable with. You know, the wheelchair here says something about the people here and what's going on. But the thing that is kind of catching me is the two red things here. So you have to understand red is going to be like a very hot color. It grabs our visual attention very quickly, and even small parts of red are going to carry a lot of visual weight in a photograph. So these little small things of red in the background, my eye goes like immediately to these things right here and not to the dog. So in this instance, I'd love to see you go back in, reshoot this again, but try and get the background a little bit less busy and be very aware of these reds and try not to capture them in the image because it's really going to distract from our attention of what's going on in the image here. Second shot of the vet with the dog. Wow, super awesome shot. Very powerful. I love how it's candid and you're getting the reaction of the vet as he's interacting with the dog here. Super shot. Only thing I might recommend here is maybe try taking this image with a smaller depth of field so the background could go out of focus just a little bit and we can, you know, be a little bit more directed just to, you know, his face here and what's going on. Now I know I copied and pasted this from a Word document, so it might not be perfectly rendered here, but also his face looks like it's just a teeny bit out of focus. So we want to make sure that that is also in focus in this image. I'm not sure what the shutter setting you took this with, but perhaps also maybe your shutter setting was a little bit slow here, and that's why we have the blurring. And then the third shot, kind of a portrait of the dog. I mean, this is just a gorgeous shot. I love having that little bit of flag in the lower right corner. You know, the dog's face is in sharp focus here. And then also we can kind of see the harness or the uniform that the dog has says something a little bit about this dog. It's not just an average, ordinary dog. It's one of these dogs that is actively involved in this project. So I think this is a super shot, very powerful shot, and might even be your first shot in your sequence of the project. So keep at it. I think you've got a great concept here and a lot of good subject matter to work with. Just be aware, probably the biggest thing is just your backgrounds, and try to get a lot of this interaction between the vets and the animals. That is what's really going to be compelling. You know, we love emotion in our images, so I think from that perspective, you can really capture a lot of it in this whole project here. So any questions, let me know. But otherwise, keep along the same path, and I think you're going to have something really wonderful here. Okay, next up we have Sullivan's photos. And I'll give you a second or two to take a look at his proposal here. Just reading it as we go along. So the first thing that struck me about this is you're doing three things that, you know, are really personal to you, which I think is great. You know, your fascination with magic, your Canadian heritage, and something that certainly is very much part of that heritage. In fact, I'm sipping on a Tim Hortons coffee right now, and I am married to a Canadian woman, so I can definitely relate to the Tim Hortons thing. And you know what's interesting about this? I especially like the fact that you've got the Tim Hortons Canadian cups, which typically always have the French on them, which the American Tim Hortons don't usually have the French on them. And then just a last shot of campus that just speaks to your whole experience here, uh, you know, at school and at a different place. So here's the thing. I look at these three images. They all are executed well, technically very sound. But the thing for the final project that I think is not working here is they don't feel like they're related. They look like three completely different images of totally different things. So, what I would recommend to you in this instance is perhaps pick one of these things. So maybe you want to do a study on all of the things that kind of separate your daily life or have been influenced in your daily life by your Canadian heritage. So maybe we do a Tim Hortons thing. Maybe we do a picture of like the cover of your passport. You know, think of all things from your daily routine that can speak to that Canadian heritage. Then you put them all together and you have an artist statement that goes along with them. And then I think it really works and it becomes cohesive. So it looks like they all tell one story. Again, same way with the magic images. You know, maybe you want to do a bunch of different shots that represent different magic tricks. You know, here again, I kind of have a tough time determining whether, okay, is this a magic trick or is it just like, you know, showing a deck of cards for, you know, poker players and, you know, the ace of spades would be, you know, kind of the iconic card. You've got to, I guess I'd be less interested in this, although I'm not going to discourage you from doing that because, again, you know, you could probably do a multiple of different images representing different tricks. I think in a way though you're going to have to really show that it's magic and not just, you know, pictures of still life items. And then lastly, your experience on campus. You know, again, I think that it could work, although honestly I have to say I get a lot of projects that, you know, sort of like here's a day in my life on campus, and I tend to find these are the least interesting projects simply because, you know, all of us, at least everyone in the class, are students, and they experience these same images in kind of the same way as you. So you've really got to find a way to demonstrate how a day in your life on campus is different than any other average, ordinary students. And I think in this case, you know, this is a scene that, you know, probably all of us, even I'm not even a student, I'm, you know, a professor on campus, and, you know, when I'm walking to class at night, this is something I see when I'm going from the parking lot. So how can you make it individual to your own life experiences? And like honestly, you don't have to do this, but for me, I think the most interesting one is the whole Canadian idea, finding things that have influenced your life from your experience as a Canadian and showing how those are maybe different from someone who would have been raised in Buffalo or raised in the United States. So think about that, give it some thought. And if you want to email me or even give me a buzz to talk about this a little bit more, I'd be happy to do that. But you know, as it stands, I think these three things, it's too much, too diverse, and not cohesive. What we're looking for is a group of images that all kind of are of the same thing or the same idea or subject matter. So give that some thought, work on it, and hopefully you can kind of pull it together for the final project here. So with that, I will conclude on everybody's projects. Again, after you've watched these and you do have some questions, feel free to get in touch with me and we can continue the dialogue about that. So with that, look forward to seeing your projects on Friday.